In this video, we will be discussing Lecture 3, which is about the historical process by which Aoteroa was formally annexed. This lecture covers territorial acquisition, a timeline of how New Zealand was annexed, proclamations and possessions of sovereignty, the factors that influence sovereignty such as the 3 C's, pushes and pulls that affected Britain, and myths of the empire. There are 3 methods of territorial acquisition. Cession is the voluntary transfer of territory between nations by treaty. Discovery is the act of finding unknown land, and conquest is the acquisition of land by force against the will of the original peoples. The following is a timeline that roughly covers the messy process of Britain claiming sovereignty over New Zealand. On the 15th of June 1839, the letters patent, which are instructions from the King to the Governor-General, extended the jurisdiction of New South Wales to New Zealand. On the 6th of February 1840, the initial signing of the treaty took place, which was a bid to secure sovereignty. On the 21st of May 1840, Hobson proclaimed sovereignty over the North Island by cession, and the South Island by discovery, as iwi from the South Island did not sign the treaty. On the 16th of June 1840, the laws of New South Wales were applied to New Zealand through the New South Wales Act. On the 2nd of October 1840, proclamations of sovereignty were publicly notified in London. This was Britain putting the other imperial powers on notice that they were claiming New Zealand as part of their empire. Balance distinguishes between the ideas of the proclamation and possession of sovereignty. A proclamation of sovereignty is a nominal assertion of sovereignty. It is sovereignty in name only, and does not affect the people inhabiting the territory. Balance proposes 3 ways of measuring the movement from a proclamation to the actual acquisition of sovereignty. The intervention scale measures the power exerted to obtain an empire through conversion and conquest. This happened in New Zealand over time, until the 1860s, where there were significant British resources in New Zealand. The ostensible authority scale measures the nominal or imagined situation. Nominal authority over New Zealand moved quickly from an expression of interest in 1833 to ostensibly full sovereignty in 1840 with the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi. The actual control scale measures the success of intervention and the substance of authority. This factor happened over years and as such is more complicated. It must be considered by looking at the factors that influenced annexation. The 3 C's that affected annexation are commerce, Christianity, and colonization. In terms of commerce or capitalism, in the mid-1800s there was an economic crisis. The vast potential land resources in New Zealand led the British to believe that if they exported enough labour and capital to New Zealand, it would become a productive colony. Christianity had an impact, as missionaries thought that it was their duty or obligation to bring civilization and Christianity to the indigenous peoples of New Zealand. Colonization was an influence, as the economic crisis meant that there was a surplus of labour and capital in Britain, which they wanted to ship to New Zealand as an act of large-scale organised migration. These influences can be organised into pushes and pulls experienced by Britain and the overall ideologies of the time. Pushes from the UK include the dire economic conditions, the need for new markets and migration, and ideologies of the time. The pulls from New Zealand and Australia include missionaries, the colonists, the Wakefield and New Zealand Company, and merchants and traders. However, the prevailing ideologies of the time, or the myths of the empire, must also be considered. These include the Anglo-French rivalry. The British government was repeatedly told that the French had designs on New Zealand through Busby's alarmist reports. Britain may have proclaimed sovereignty, but this may not have been enough to deter the French from trying to settle New Zealand. There was a self-image of superiority and the idea of a civilizing mission. This was particularly due to the impact of Christianity, and the fact that the initial settlers were quite barbaric towards Maori, and there was a desire to protect Maori from these settlers. There was the belief that superior British civilization would improve the lives of Maori. This idea is connected to the white man's burden, that sending in more settlers to establish British law and institutions would save the indigenous peoples from themselves. The ultimate acquisition of sovereignty by the British was driven primarily by these myths of the empire. Good luck studying. The next video will cover the Declaration of Independence and the Treaty of Waitangi.